There is this stupid notion that goes around the academia and media. This notion is that World War I is a pointless war and that it is a tragedy that it happened. But it's clear that these people have no understanding of geopolitics or some of the events that led up to World War I that made a war in Europe, a war as deadly as World War I, worth it. I'm going to cover some of the reasons why every belligerent nation fought in World War I, with the exception of small countries that played a very small role in the war, like Portugal, who sent one battalion to the Western Front. People suck off Bismarck all the time, and while I agree he was a smart man and basically decided the course of Germany for the next 20 years, the idea that Germany could have maintained its alliance with Russia is stupid. French investors were already pouring money into Russia for the growth of Russian industry, and the Russian Empire, independent of any German hostility or influence, sided with France in multiple crises, including several war scares. These economic and diplomatic ties culminated with the Franco-Russian alliance of 1892, which lasted until Russia fell into civil war. The problem Germany had with Russia is that Russia was eventually going to become unstoppable, both economically and militarily. For most of the 19th century, Russia was an agrarian economy, which exported tons of natural resources, but due to social unrest and a need to industrialize, Tsar Alexander II abolished serfdom and reformed the financial system, allowing for more industrial growth. Russian railways were going exponentially. In 1880, there was 22,000 kilometers of track, but in 1917, it was 81,000 kilometers, as well as Russia's monstrous population of 170 million in 1914, while Germany's population around the same time was 60 million. Russia also had the advantage of being self-sufficient in a case of war, while the Germans were quite literally starving during World War I, so of course Germany wanted some of that land. The German Empire, as the premier power in Europe, wanted to militarily and economically dominate Europe, as well as maintain the integrity of its lands. France wanted Alsace-Lorraine back badly, and made it known throughout the world, so Germany wanted to permanently pacify France so they couldn't agitate in any meaningful way. Another problem was Britain, who was in a naval arms race with Germany, and was the one who was blockading and starving Germany during World War I. So the obvious thing to do, the obvious two things would be to stop their arms race, or defeat Britain and impose harsh terms for their navy. I know the full name is Austria-Hungary, but that's a mouthful, so I'm shortening it to Austria. Austria was a deeply insecure empire. Well, they had a better economy than Italy, and a navy that was better than both of those of Italy and the Ottomans. It was clear that a big enough hit would shatter the empire. The goal for Austria was to secure its borders, so that no one can meaningfully contest its non-German territories. The chief agitators were Serbia, Romania, and Italy, and while they were fully able to occupy Romania and Serbia and impose terms that would have stopped them from advancing their interest into Austria, they weren't able to take out Italy, but that's besides the point. If Austria won the war, they would have recovered their lost prestige. For the majority of the 19th century, Austria was the laughingstock of Europe, and they also would have unified the people of Austria in a great triumphant victory. At the time of World War I, the Ottomans had been picked on for over 50 years. Their military was unable to put down the Greek rebellion in the 1820s, and for the rest of the 19th century, they had only survived thanks to Britain's fears of Russia, using the Ottomans as a counterbalance. The Ottomans, despite British support, continued to recede in Europe, and after losing the 1878 war to Russia, practically lost control of all of the Balkan states. The final blow to the Ottomans in Europe was the First Balkan War in 1913, when they lost all of their European holdings, aside from Thrace. They also lost Egypt in 1873 and Libya in 1912, basically erasing all holdings in North Africa. It is doubtful the Ottomans would actually be able to pick up lost European lands if they had won the war, but they would have taken back Egypt and Libya. The foremost reason for the Ottomans entering the war was economic gains, a friendly Germany supporting the oil business, as well as erasure of all British and French influence from their country. I'm not sure that the Ottomans would actually industrialize because of their free trade policies, but the possibility is there. Aside from economic gains, the Ottomans would be uncontested in the Eastern Mediterranean. At the time, they were in a naval arms race with Italy, who continuously threatened Ottoman possessions. With both the Royal Navy and the French Navy out of the picture after a Central Powers victory, Germany would be the main focus of any future naval conflict. And if they did attack the Ottomans, Germany would come to the rescue because of their investments in the oil fields. The First Balkan War saw Bulgaria make huge gains, annexing parts of Macedonia and the entirety of Western Thrace. These were reversed in the Second Balkan War, when Bulgaria was literally at war with all of its neighbors. The goal for Bulgaria when entering the war was to gain lands lost in the Second Balkan War. Bulgaria was a strategic ally for Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottomans, because it would have been the stabilizing force in the Balkans. The Ottomans wouldn't have to worry about the West, and if Serbia or Romania started to agitate in Austria, they would have Bulgaria on the second front willing to protect Austria. Because if Serbia makes gains in Austria, they will inevitably threaten ethnic Serbian and Romanian lands in Bulgaria. I believe that Bulgaria would have been an ally to the Ottomans, but it's possible that they become enemies after the war. Germany posed a perpetual threat to Russia, because sooner or later the Russians will become unstoppable due to exponential growth in Russian industry. The Germans had big industry, the largest military in the world, and most importantly, dreams to conquer foreign territory. It should be clear that the German Empire, aside from the United States, was the biggest industrial power in the world. Universities in Berlin took students from all over the world, and engineering was such a common job that the German army was supplied with portable houses that required engineering skills in order to be assembled and disassembled. To protect against the German menace, Russia needed buffer territory between Berlin and their precious Moscow, as well as other major Russian cities, which we may call the core of Russia. Russia's ambition is to protect her core, and in order to do this, Russia needed to annex more territory. And in a scenario of Russian victory, we may see that Russia totally annexes Galicia while also setting up some sort of buffer state or demilitarized zone along the German border. Russia was also a pan-Slavic protector. The cultural notion in the Russian Empire was that as the biggest and most powerful Slavic nation, an Eastern Orthodox nation, it had a duty to eventually liberate all Slavic and Orthodox lands, and once liberated or conquered, to protect these lands. While Russia did not have a formal alliance with Serbia, it was clear that Russia would defend Serbia if war came. As a minor point, I would like to draw attention to the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, where Russia suffered a humiliating defeat. Russia wanted to regain some lost prestige after losing to the Japanese, so a victory of any kind in any war would be favorable to wallowing in the misery that was the Russo-Japanese War. France's biggest concern throughout the 20th century, and perhaps even today, is Germany. For most of the history of early modern Europe, France has been the dominant land power. Even in the Middle Ages, France's total population was consistently number one in Europe. But when the various German states united, it was clear that not only from a military and economic point of view, but also a demographic one, that Germany was on top. France had a lower birth rate than the German Empire. When the German population was 60 million, France's population was 40 million, and today Germany is 80 million and France is 60 million. This population difference, as well as industrial and military differences, pose an existential threat to France, so naturally France wanted to neuter this threat. Alsace-Lorraine was the biggest motivator for war. French territory being owned by Germans was a big no-no. The motivators for Britain entering the war are weak, and there's a better argument for Britain staying out of the war than joining it. But to make this brief and give some examples, Britain wanted to build a railroad from Cape Town to Cairo, and needed German land to do it. Britain wanted resources from Ottoman lands in the Middle East. Britain wanted to curb the German economy, which was becoming a threat. Britain wanted to protect Belgium. As mentioned before, Italy was in a naval arms race with the Ottomans and Austria-Hungary. Defeating them would put an end to the struggle. Italians were also living abroad in non-Italian territories, such as Dalmatia and South Tyrol, which were controlled by Austria-Hungary. Italy, of course, wanted these lands because they spoke pasta. The United States shouldn't have entered the war. While the conclusion of World War I is regrettable, the end of monarchy and all that, I still believe that it wasn't a pointless war. Something I want to address is the nationalism argument. The argument goes something like this. The soldiers and people were blinded by their nationalism. They couldn't see through all the pointless slaughter and realized that they were dying for nothing. Nationalism is people usually of the same race or nationality grouping together and doing collective action for the greater good of their nation. So given the reasons listed above for the war, were they dying for nothing? Well, it looks like their nationalism wasn't pointless and did serve a purpose. And don't tell me that disarming Russia of our industry wasn't in the interest of the common German people, because it clearly was. And uniting the ethnic Italians was clearly in the interest of the common Italian person.
Zedra vistvu it Zedrav Steve Ut. Yeah, please subscribe.